these aspects that we mentioned at the very beginning. So what society assigns to be a male or female: heels, long hair, beards, and all other aspects. And then sex characteristics. These are biological differences, and it relates to intersex status, or to those people who could be born with the characteristics of both sex. Mm-hmm. So this is why sex characteristics are also relevant. But as I said, in majority of jurisdictions, it will not be separate by different grounds of discrimination. In Serbia, it is the case. So it means that we always have to see what is the main ground for discrimination when we have facts of the case, which also means that sometimes we can have more gender grounds, more grounds for discrimination in some specific case. Not necessarily that only one is present. Here I gave you some examples of different grounds just to understand when we can have a discrimination. And the first example is that given worker who is in a same-sex relations ranking and worse reviews than other workers for no reason. What that would be discrimination where exactly, Elena, based on sexual orientation. Requiring a person to provide information about their medical history or proof of having undergone particular medical procedures in order to use their preferred name, pronouns, or title. So this is exactly, it is related to transgender persons. And what we have is that in many jurisdictions, even in Europe, we had countries which allowed this, let's say, medical treatment, but then they didn't change in documents identity, depending on what are the elements for that identity. But of course, name is the main part of our identity. Then we have a third example. A person has had inappropriate comments and teasing from workmates as she's neither man or woman. Gender expression, because when I say it's neither man, it means that the person is wearing, for example, all these characteristics like hair and all others that we already explained, but belongs biologically to another sex. And sometimes even it's also related to those persons who do not see themselves as being male or female. They don't want to identify themselves as being biologically identified.
Would that be if they consider themselves non-binary, for example, in gender identity?
If they do not see themselves as, then it's more, but it really depends on the facts of the case, more of gender expression, and it can also be a part of their gender identity in some cases. But it really depends how deep it is and how they express themselves. So this is why these grounds are vague, and this is why, for example, many jurisdictions, they don't go so deep, like, let's say dividing it and splitting into several grounds, but they will definitely be under the gender. And the last example, enforcing a policy in which men may not wear jewelry or make up at work. Expression. So this is a good example of this one. And also, like this third example, if it's not how the person is treating himself, but for example, the person is teasing because that person has both characteristics, then it can be intersex person. So it's really depends, as I said, on the facts of the case. So not all of these examples are clear as such. When it comes to the equality, it is important to understand that we have two concepts of equality. So theoretically, when the notion of equality appeared legally, it started with formal equality. So when we attained equality, it was in the Constitution and in the law, saying that we are all equal before the law. So legally, when we are born, we have the same rights, the same titles, and we can also challenge violations that happen to us in front of all courts and other bodies that can decide about our request. So this is a formal concept. But at the same time, what we understood is that in all societies we have power relations. So if we have one group who is dominant in that society, and then it became like replicated in many countries as well, the group which is in power doesn't want to take that power off. Yeah, they are not giving power to everyone, and also if they are in different positions to decide about the laws, about the policies, about the implementation of those laws and policies, then it would be very hard to change the reality in that society. And what we also understood is that we are born, but we are not in the same situation. And for example, if you have a kid who is born in a wealthy family, educated family, having from 2-3 years of his or her life going to private schooling, to private preschool education with excellent teachers, with having opportunity to learn languages, then going to a school which is like a private school with a lot of opportunities. And then at the same time, you have a kid who was born in a non-wealthy family. Can we just imagine a Roma kid who was born in some family living in some informal settlement, not going to school, preschool education as well, not having so many opportunities? We know that they will never be in the same position. So this is why this concept of substantive equality emerged, in order to shape those realities and to say, yeah, substantive equality means, and then this is how two additional theories appeared. One is equality of results, and another one is equality of opportunity. So what is equality of opportunity? It means that all have opportunity to study, that we acknowledge that everyone can apply for a job, but who will get it? It's a part of a competition. And what we also understood is that it's not only enough to give opportunity. Sometimes we really need to also be oriented toward equality of results. So we need to find more measures in order to allow someone to really benefit from these disadvantages, sometimes even historical disadvantages. And this is what we, for example, see in America with African Americans. We know, nowadays for ages. First of all, there was one very famous case decided by the Constitutional Court, because the first equality was exactly formal equality. It meant that, for example, going on a trip by train, and then have different cabs open for white people and for African American, but they were separated. They couldn't mix, and that the quality of those conditions, which much more better for white people than for African Americans. It was not an equality, but the court said, but it's equality because they can enter here with others, and for example, white people, they cannot enter for example, the part of the train which is open for African Americans. But that was like a formal equality, like it resulted in the same condition not being allowed to enter at a certain point. But we understood that this is not equality. Equality is to have diversity and to have what we said, first of all, equality of opportunity, and then the equality of results. Why it is important to orient toward equality of results? Because in many countries, we understand that due to all these elements that we just discussed, someone who is in a margin of society is not, cannot be allowed to use these opportunities in reality. And for example, we also had, in some cases, it's a very famous, for example, Kalanki case that was decided against Germany by the time European Court of Justice, now Court of Justice of the EU, Court of the European Union, which said, okay, we opened this job, which was dominantly male, for both sexes, for male candidate, for female candidate, and for male candidate. They were equally or almost equally qualified, and then we chose the male. So we gave an opportunity for a female candidate to run for that candidacy, but the male candidate got it. Equality of results would be, okay, in that case, we also need to implement additional measures, like we call it affirmative measures, and to give, in that case, we have candidates who are equally or almost the same qualified to give a preference to a female candidate for jobs which are male dominant, because that would be the quality of results. We want to have like more women in STEM professions, as we already discussed. And then we come to basically the notion, the second part of the notion. So what is, we speak about equality and we said what is equality, but then what is discrimination? It's another part of the coin, and it relates and it derives from a Latin word, discriminare, which means making a difference. And basically here you have, I don't know if you can see it clear on this photo, but here we understand that discrimination appears when we have those who are in the same position and we treat them differently. But also another part of the coin is that we have those who are in unequal position, but we treat them equally. And this is this last example on this photo. So this small boy will never be able to see what's on the playground, if we treat them who are in different situations equally. Because the states, they have different interests. And basically, it is so hard to get to a common understanding of certain terms. That's one point. And another one is that sometimes we don't want to conserve a definition without some aspects which are just appearing in a time, because we know now that we are facing with different challenges in international arena and that new emerging issues are appearing. So this is why it is unusual to have a definition. However, for discrimination, they have a definition, and we have it in international fora. This first convention, it is called International Convention on Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So the first definition that was given to us in international arena was concerned of racial discrimination. Why? Mostly because of the apartheid, which was at a time very present in South Africa. CEDAW is another convention, and for us, the most important document. Tomorrow we will speak more about CEDAW. CEDAW is a convention on elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. So basically, it's a very important document dealing with gender equality. And then finally, we have also many other documents which prohibit discrimination, mostly also, among other grounds, on sex or gender, depending. And we also have very important international jurisprudence of these courts or quasi-judicial bodies, which give us more elements to understand what discrimination is and what are the elements of discrimination. Here we have this first definition that we got in the international arena. And what we can see here is that, I will read this Article 1. The term racial discrimination means any distinction, exclusion, restriction, or preference based on race, color, descent, or national or ethnic origin, which has the purpose or effect of nullifying or impairing the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal footing of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, or any other field of public life. How do you see this definition? Clear for you that you're, for example, legislator or judge? Do you think that it will be clear what are the elements of discrimination from this definition? And pay attention that this convention was adopted in 1965. So now it's a pretty old document. Do you find it clear? More or less. We have all the elements. So what we see different acts, distinction, exclusion, restriction, and preference. These are the acts which result in discrimination or unequal treatment. what we also see, we see the grounds of discrimination. We say race, but the convention says apart from race, we also speak about color, descent, national or ethnic origin. So it's also broader than race. And today you also have authors claiming that there is no different races. There is only one race, and this is human race, yeah? And that basically all other elements are grounds for discrimination, which is a very interesting and also accurate, basically, discussion on this issue. Then what we have, what are the consequences of this act? This is nullifying or impairing recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on equal footing human rights. So this is the consequence, a very serious consequence, that due to this act, so like giving preference to someone or restricting certain rights, someone cannot enjoy in full or equally with others certain rights. And we also see a very, let's say, broad area of life in which this convention can be exercised at political, economic, social, cultural, or any other field of public life. What is extremely important is that Article 4 of this convention also, as you can see, condemns all propaganda, which basically says that one race is better, superior of other race. And this is extremely important because apart from a legal definition, and mostly you are not lawyers, not all of you, yeah, not lawyers. So for us as lawyers, legal definition is extremely important because this is the only way to protect someone from violation and to give redress in a case if we have violation. But at the same time, it is important that we understand what is the reason behind different aspects of discrimination which appears in a society. And usually it is that notion that certain race is superior, more superior than another. Do you have any example of that in history?
Did we sign this?
Yes, this convention. Yes.
But one thing in my mind when you talk about propaganda, I remember the talk about the workers from Ghana.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden they were making a statistic about the HIV positive in Ghana, or I don't know what else. So that came to my mind.
Yes, this is propaganda. And this is also based on a superiority. We don't need them because they are lazy, they're not so intelligent, they're coming here, they are not healthy. So all these reasons. Exactly, this is a very good example because usually Article 4 really relates to immigration of population in many countries. So it's not only in Serbia, but in many other countries. Exactly. So it's a very good example. Okay, I know that you're all a little bit tired, but let me just finish this with definitions and then we can have a break, okay? So the second convention, which was adopted after this convention on racial discrimination, is CEDAW, as we said, and we see a very similar definition. So this Article 1 was based on a racial discrimination convention, which says that this is, again, distinction, exclusion, or restriction made on the basis of sex that has the effect or purpose of impairing or nullifying the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise by women, irrespective of their marital status, on a basis of equality of men and women, of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, civil, or any other field. Do you see any difference? Like, what is so specific about this convention?
There is no public life at the end, any other field?
Absolutely. So see, here we speak about public life. Excellent, Jelena. Now we speak about any other field, which can be also a private one. Why it is important? Because we know, for example, that today families are a great generator of equality, but at the same time of discrimination. You know, what is happening, how we are growing up in those families. And then a second issue is extremely important, domestic violence, exactly. So this is why it's important. So the scope of application of this convention is broader. So this is the first thing. And second, what we also...
Just not gender. Maybe to exclude like trans women.
Basically, that was claimed by some, but of course, but today we have something like these conventions. If you remember, we spoke about it. They are treaty bodies. They have treaty bodies like different committees, and we have committee on elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. And that committee, among other things, are also issuing something that is called general recommendation, which means that the committee is interpreting parts of the convention. And now there is no doubt that a sex was term that was assigned to 79 when the convention was adopted, but that nowadays it has a broader meaning. But it's a good observation as well. Another observation, what you can also say for this definition. I know that you are not, mostly that you are not lawyers, but it's
also nuclear and nothing.
It is very specific, which means that why this marital status was included, because unfortunately, even today's some women, they have rights based on their marital status, in a way that if they are married, they can lose some rights, they can gain some rights, they cannot move freely, change the place of residence, have a citizenship. So that's okay. So all different aspects which are important in this respect. But also what we've seen when we take a look of the first definition, seeing race, color, descent, and national ethnic origin, does this convention limits who is entitled to rights in this convention? No, it's very broad. So everyone who can be considered to be a national or ethnic minority, for example. But when we take a look of CEDAW, the first thing which is important for us to understand is that this convention gives something that we call asymmetrical protection, meaning that it gives entitlement only to women and girls, which means that that men, if a man or boys are discriminated, which can also happen, they cannot claim rights under this convention. And it's not the same under some other international documents, for example, such as European Convention on Human Rights, which is a regional document. So mostly provisions, they say discrimination based on sex, discrimination based on gender, giving symmetrical protection. However, it is important to also find a corresponding article from previous convention to CEDAW. And here we see Article 5. So what Article 5 says? State parties shall take all appropriate measures. First, to modify the social and cultural patterns of conduct of men and women with a view to achieving the elimination of prejudices and customary and all other practices which are based on the idea of the inferiority or the superiority of either of the sexes or on stereotyped roles for men and women. And B, to ensure that family education includes a proper understanding of maternity as a social function and the recognition of the common responsibility of men and women in the upbringing and development of their children, it being understood that the interest of the children is the primordial consideration in all cases. What Article 5 is telling us? How we basically understand what's the role and what's the responsibility of states who ratify this convention.
Maybe the goal here you can see is the equality of results.
Not good. So first of all, this article says you can have perfect laws. You can claim that you protected gender equality, that you proclaim that gender equality is accepted in your society. You can have the best law in the world, but if you're not changing the patterns, exactly what we now discussed, you will never achieve equality, real equality in practice. So it means that states need to do more. legislation is the first step. Second one is to modify these construed roles in a society. And what we see here, please remember that we said that Convention is giving asymmetrical approach to women. Only women are entitled. But in this Article 5, we see that responsibility of states goes not only to protect women and girls, but to modify this pattern, which also includes harmful prejudices towards men and boys, because it also affects the enjoyment of rights of men, of women and girls. And we here see family education. So we just discussed that family can also be a regenerator of discrimination. What can also be done? What states should do apart from legislation to modify this, let's say, socially construed expectations and responsibilities which are assigned to one sex over another? How we can do that? Changing public narrative. How we are changing public narrative? By using media to change. Education. So the media, education.
I would also say that we have to change something in the economic base, because especially in our Western societies right now, the issue is not really that women don't have that it's expected by women to do all the care work, but the bigger issue I would say is that it's expected for women to work and do care work on top. So we have the economic necessity for both parents to work, and because of that, the care work is mostly done by women and in combination with their normal work. So we have a double workload for them, and I think that's the economic base is what's forcing them to do that.
That's also one aspect for discussion as well. Absolutely agree with you. Another one, when you said economic aspect, is also access to resources which are available for men and women. So there are more elements of that, of course. But if you want to change the patterns, it means also family education would also be that upbringing, and this is what B is exactly are saying, that also men and women, they can equally use that opportunities, as you said, like paternal leave, yeah? Which is also very short in majority of European Union countries. But it's too long. But then it also triggers discrimination. It's a driver for discrimination as well. Okay, so we'll stop here with the definition of discrimination. I'll give you 10 minutes break and then we will continue. Okay? Jelena, kad ste rekli da morate da krenete? 28, dobro, znači imat ćemo još vremena da prođemo kroz sve. Nema problema, žao mi je što ima taman posle.
Ima da, nema puno napredujemo. Hoćeš došao mi ti? Da, tamo niko pomogu.
Ćemo da otvorimo i vrata da nam uđe malo vazduh. Hvala vam puno. Što vas toliko maltretiraju na poslu?
Ja sam nas uzela slobodan dan. Ono su mi javili da je nešto rok za sutra u 12, što ne može stigne sutra odgovor nikako, pa sam onda i urela za ovako aparat ovdje.
A gdje ste? U nekoj nevladinoj organizaciji ili? A vi zastupate banke, ja.
Onda kad je bila revizija da prošlo godinu to menju kao u mašini, nema tu ni radnog vremena ni ništa.
Jo, užas. A gdje ste, u kojoj ste banci? U Raiffeisenu.
I sam ne mogu da se žalim super, je sve to samo nekad u ulicu. Malo ljudi i mnogo posla.
Ja, ali stvarno im utisak da je sve manje ljudi u bankama.
Jeste, mislim,
Da se sve automatizuje i prebacuje na online banking, da.
Oni baš vode računa o tome da se to pomoće svojim ljudstva. Za mene, ove neke stvari ne vredi postoji tamo postoji revizije, da, nekam u smislu, da AI to preuzme,
ali još uvijek nikako. Ne znam šta bih rekla. Pa meni je žao isto što mi se tu, da. I vidjet ćete iz prezentacije, naravno ja sam i tu ako nešto treba, vidjet ćemo se sutra, pa pogledat ćete prezentaciju ako treba. Pa dobro, lepo je da se podržavate i da se lepo družite, to je super. Pa dobro, pa da, pa vaš 4, zato što imamo ove dvoje kolega iz inostranstva i Aleksandra, je li tako? Da. I da, ne znam da li mi je online, sam videla na početku. Ne vredi moj apel da se ne dolazi online, nego da se dolazi što više, ali mislim, ukinut ćemo to van obraz. Profesor finansije inače bio poleći, pa ajde da ostaneš malo, ali ja stvarno mislim da mora da se dolazi, potpuno drugačije. I ja kažem, i meni je neprijatno, ja volim da ustajem, da vam dam neki zadatak, jer to ne mogu da radim sa ljudima kada su online, što vas stvarno limitira. Jer kad radimo svi online, onda je online, pa je to drugačije, ali ovo je baš hibridno.
Da se mnogo da grupno imamo online, kad baš mora nešto.
To smo već jednom imali, sećate se ono kad smo imali, ne znam ste bili na tom času, kada smo se dogovorili, onda je to u redu i to je onda isto ima smisla, mislim da možete da neku vežbicu da pogledamo neki film zajedno, nešto prodiskutujemo, pa smo svi online, pa je drugačija energija. Ali ovo kad je malo, mislim, ja sam na primjer ljudima koji su online jer ih trenutno ni ne vidim, ne mogu da dam prostor, znači mogu da ih povremeno pitam, ali njima je pažnja potpuno odsutna. Tako da. Ovo prvo vam je bio uvod u suštini da malo uđete, vi niste pravnice, je li tako? A jeste, završili ste prava. Da, u suštini, pogotovo za kolege, pošto je program otvoren za one koji nisu, znači da taj nekako međunarodno i evropsko pravo daje više uvod kroz neki istorijat i više kroz neke institucije nego što vas uvodi u malo tu problematiku i suštinu koja je onako vrlo karakteristična za ovo pitanje. Tako da ja mislim za vas, pogotovo Family Judgments, mislim to je zaista poseban kurs, jer ga nema nigde, nikoga drugi na svetu nema kao poseban kurs u okviru ovakvog predmeta, ali vidjet ćemo.
Ja sam najviše za te Family Judgments bila zbog toliko po sudovima sam prošla po toj godine i ta neka analizovana ja sam jedan od razloga što sam pisala.
Je to?
Ja sam se napisala na sudu od strane sudija koje su žene, koje znači, a sve pod nekim tim onako utjecajem sredine, utjecajem svačega nečega, koje často posjeci i sudije i ovdje, baš mislim da treba raditi i promjeni šta vidite u toj poziciji, baš može da se napiše cijela jedna zbirka case law za taj.
Apsolutno slažem se, leto, drago mi da imate to iskustvo i slobodno na ovim časovima, ako hoćete da podelite i neki slučaj, jer vi onda zastupate banku, vi onda radite kao advokat in-house, da. Pa ako imate neke slučajeve, mislim naravno da sve to možemo da anonimizujemo, ali da podelimo pa da raspravljamo, super, da znate. Mislim da znam koliko je bilo sati kada sam vam dala pauzu. 7,5. Ali smo daleko, ne možete ni da izađete napolje. Znači, Aleksandar nam i nije tu. Aleksandar. Ups. Uglavnom je tu, pa da ja znam da on je uglavnom imalo čas. Iz Human Rights, to ćete pričati, ja mislim će profesor Terasije da ispituje Human Rights, pa ćete onda pričati s njim. Susana ćete pričati o Feminist Judgments. Sutra ili tamo nedelje, vidjet ćemo. Ne brej. Još vremena je samo. Ok. Ako sam dala još malo vremena online, ćete da krenemo. Okay, so colleagues who are online, can we continue?
Yes.
Okay, great. So now what we've seen are two definitions in these two international conventions. But you remember that I also said that we have a very important international jurisprudence of courts and quasi-judicial bodies. And they also, in their practice, by deciding on different facts of the case, they extended that definition. And for example, here we see one definition, which is like a common one, having different elements which are recognized in this jurisprudence. So what we can say about discrimination is that this is any unjustified discrimination or unequal treatment or omission which is reflected in the exclusion, restriction, or preference in relation to individuals or groups and their family members or persons close to them, be it overt or covered, which is based on real or presumed personal characteristics. So it's like more, let's say, at the same time, the wording is simpler than what you see in these previous definitions. There are also some elements which were not explicitly included in previous definitions. So what are the elements of definition? First of all, we have a different treatment. And this is something which is the core of discrimination. As I said, appearing from a Latin word, discriminare, be treated differently. The second thing, which is extremely important to understand, is that it can be act or failure to act. So also not performing what is the duty of someone can also lead to discrimination. For example, if you have a person with disability and then now this floor is inaccessible. If you have a student who is person with disability using like wheelchair, that person will not be able to join us for this class. So failure to find another room to accommodate that situation would be failure to act and will be discrimination. The third element is the consequences of that act or failure. And we already seen that in these international documents that we have exclusion, restriction, or preference. What is exclusion? Exclusion is when someone cannot enjoy certain right at all. Restriction is, for example, what we also had an example, like wages, which are less for women than for men. This is limitation. So women, they perform the job, they can work, but at the same time, their rights are not in the same quantity as for others. And preference means that giving preference to some people or to some groups means at the same time discrimination towards others. And we usually do not think that preference is also the consequence of discrimination. Another element which is important, and this is what we've seen on the photo with a small boy who is trying to see what's on a playground but can't because of his height, is basically that we have two main forms of discrimination. One is direct and another one is indirect. And we will come to that. What does it mean? Then, who are the subjects? who are exposed to certain act or failure. First of all, it can be individual who has certain characteristic. What does it mean? It means that, for example, if I'm an employer and I think that women are sensitive and I want to give the job to a male candidate, that can be also discrimination, although one individual is exposed to discrimination. At the same time, it can also be a group. And it's also important that it can be a family member or even a person who is close to that person. For example, I'm a mother and my child has disability and my employer decides to fire me because I'm taking some free days because I have to take care of my kid to bring him to some medical checks, whatever. It's also discrimination. But why it is important that we are including huge, let's say, longer list of those who can be exposed to discrimination? This is because the unavoidable element of discrimination is personal characteristic, which means that sometimes we can have an unequal treatment, but it's not discrimination. Or it's not discrimination based on certain characteristic, which is protected by the law. For example, like so many years ago, like 10 years ago, I had my car and my husband has another car. And then for some reason, the Ministry of Interior, they included in a registration some letters, which some years after they decided to leave. And then they required every owner of certain cars with the registration having like W or Ch or J to change the registration. And for example, for me, because I was so lucky to get that registration compared to my husband who didn't, so I needed to register my car again, to pay more for that, and also to wait more, like 2 to 3 days to get it. While my husband, he went to register his, to re-register basically his car, and he did it in 5 minutes with twice less than I. And I said, yeah, I'm discriminated. Am I discriminated? Am I taken in a different position? Of course I am, because we are in a different position. But it's not legally, it's not discrimination in a way that I can go to the Ministry of Interior and charge the ministry for that. What is that? It can be something that we call maladministration, meaning that the ministry should not, let's say, treat its citizens in such a way, because if that was a policy that was not well considered when it was implemented, then the Ministry of Interior should say, yes, we made a mistake for this or this reason. We will change it. You can register your car, but you can do it free of charge. So this is what a good administration will do. They are not good administration, so they impose this, let's say, burden for certain owners, but it's still not discrimination. So what is missing in this case is personal characteristic. Jelena.
But what is the significance of intention? When we are talking about discrimination, when you do it intentionally and when you do it like.
Okay, so when I want to.
But that is, of course, it's not on that list, but a lot of our ministries or community or I don't know. They like to stay in their answer. For example,
Commissioner?
But if the document wasn't intended, because they were practice was not, but it really doesn't make a difference. The intention is not important.
Absolutely, intention is not important. Usually, in some individual cases, it will exist indirect discrimination, but it's also not the prerequisite element of that. But in indirect discrimination, usually there is no intention. Really, there is no intention because you didn't think that someone is in a position that cannot fulfill certain conditions. We will now, maybe when we, let's say, explain what is indirect discrimination, it will be like easier for you to understand. So this is why we say that it is important to understand how it is to be in someone's footing. And this is the core. So this is why this Article 5 of the CEDAW Convention is extremely important. Not only to have laws, but to understand that sometimes we have bad laws because they are not providing everyone with the same opportunities. And then, of course, with results as we discussed. And as we said, personal characteristic is an important element of discrimination. It can be real or presumed. What is a real characteristic and what is presumed? How do you read this? Any idea? Mm-hmm.
Well, so there have been cases that someone was discriminated or even attacked because of say supposed sexual orientation because of someone or gender identity or because of somebody's look or the way he actually act the supposed character.
Exactly. This is a good example. So real characteristic is something that people, that person is really having. And presumed is that we think that that person has that characteristic, but that person doesn't have it. Why it is important? Because usually for many personal grounds, we just guess. We don't know. Maybe the most obvious today is a color. Yeah? But we know we have Michael Jackson, at least who the whole life tried to be whiter than he was, lighter in his skin. With disability, with certain aspects of disability, yes. But for example, exactly. Not always, but of course, for example, we had several years ago, we had a student from Indonesia, and mostly our foreign students, they claim that they feel very safe here, that they had a positive feedback of citizens and so on and so forth. So they were very positive about being in Belgrade. But this guy, he said, "Oh, I feel very unsafe. Usually when I walk, people they're trying to catch their wallets or bags. They don't want to sit next to me and things like that." So you would think why on earth they will perform like that because people in Belgrade, especially because we completely spoke about Belgrade, are hospitable, yeah. But then we understood. Oh, so probably people thought that that person is from origin because he was alone. He was not talking, but his color of his skin was, and the way how he had a hair, it was very similar. That someone could imagine that he is of Roma origin, and everything that he explained, like with wallets, with notes, not sitting next to him, was basically what is in the majority of cases happening, to Roma population as well. So this is a presumption about your national or ethnic origin, but it can also be with ages. Now with all these beauty effects, you can think that someone is in his 30s, but that person can be in 60s, and vice versa. If someone has a very hard life in some rural area, that person can be in his or her 30s and can look like in 50s and 60s. If you see the ring on certain place or on certain ring, a certain finger, we can guess the marital status. If you see the name of a person, we can also guess what we can guess from the name. But if there is only one family name, we can guess. If they share nationality, even religion, we can guess from the name. To see how many things we can guess, and we don't basically know. Okay, so this is why it is important, because we haven't seen that in all these definitions, that also presumed personal characteristic is protected. But it is, and the case law is saying that. I mentioned, and I want to really finish it because I know that Jelena is running, that we have two forms of discrimination. One is direct and another one is indirect. So what is direct discrimination? Here you have this funny story. about this guy who is so confident, and he's saying like, sorry, you're simply not the right man for the job. Yeah, and he's talking to a woman. So basically, this is direct discrimination. We know from what the person is saying and how that person is behaving that that person is discriminating based, in this case, of course, on gender. And this is why I always say that we have Mr. Lee, our Chinese restaurant, which is like 5 minutes from the law faculty. The Mr. Lee almost always had an advertisement for a job, which was placed on the window of his restaurant, asking for female candidates to work in his restaurant. And I say, yeah, this is direct discrimination, like calling women to apply for a job. So this is basically direct discrimination. It's visible. You know that the personal characteristic is a ground for discrimination, for different treatment. What is indirect discrimination? Indirect discrimination is, as I said, usually, so for example, in this case, we will have someone with intention. I'm intentionally discriminating you. But as I said, even in a direct discrimination, it's not the main component of discrimination, although in many cases it is visible. With indirect discrimination, it's really no, usually it's not intentional, dominantly, and it means that we are just not understanding, we are treating those who are in an unequal situation equally. And for example, in our jurisprudence, we had a case with the law on primary education. As you know, the right to education is a constitutional right, and also primary education is compulsory. But we had many Roma children who couldn't enroll to schools because they've been living in informal settlements. And being in informal settlements, they didn't have address, for example, and that was a prerequisite. So someone who was writing the law was not thinking to discriminate against Roma, but they just took the ordinary case. Like, okay, we have families, they have, it's important because you know that sometimes in some schools, as they are more popular than others, parents, they want to enroll to that school. So in order to give, let's say, preference, especially to those kids who are nearby the school, then you need the address, but it was not able to be fulfilled by certain families. And what was the consequence? That some Roma children couldn't enroll to schools. So we have laws, we have constitution, which clearly says what is the requirement, but then we have another law, which we have like a prerequisite condition, and we don't think that it's discriminatory. So see, and why it is not visible at the first sight, because there is no personal characteristic as a requirement. We're not saying, oh, Roma children cannot enroll to schools, but the conditions, but not for all Roma families, but for certain Roma families, are impossible to be achieved. Yeah.
It's more usual for indirect to be for the groups, and direct like to be for an individual.
In a way, it is important to understand the consequences. You need to take into account what are the consequences for the group. So it's also individual right, which means that if every individual Roma, for example, family can claim their rights. But at the same time, for us to understand whether we have indirect discrimination or not, we have to see the consequences. How many of them cannot enroll to schools? And if they are dominantly Roma population, then we know that it is direct discrimination. For example, in Czech Republic, we had one interesting case with, again, education and with Roma children. It was basically based on the assessment of their readiness to enroll to school. And you know that all children, they have to go to this maturity test, like, and also to measure their capacities to go to school. The problem with this test was that it was neutral, equal test, but Roma children couldn't show good results for that test, and this is why they were the government, or the, let's say, Ministry of Education understood that they are less clever and that they don't have a capacity to go to regular school, so they enroll them to special schools. And for that, to understand that, for example, someone didn't want to treat Roma children discriminatory, but I said the test, those children show that they cannot perform good, and then the consequence was that they enrolled to special schools. What was problematic with this? The problematic was that children from Roma families, they lived not in a city center. They didn't have access to computers. They didn't have access to TV. For example, those kids, they were more clever than the average children for some everyday life, how to survive. So they had a good strategies on survival level. So that they, for example, merge that part, Roma children will go high. But with the information that they asked those children, which they didn't have access to, like they didn't have mobiles, which is now, yeah. It depends on, exactly, it depends on the text. So they measured intelligence with a test which was performed for average children living in other circumstances. And I have to tell you that I didn't quite understood this case, but then, for example, my son, when he was supposed to enter the school, I remember he was 6 at a time. And for example, my husband and I are vegetarians. So my kid never saw that someone is killing animals. He eat meat, but he never seen that animals are killed because he's eating. We never talk about it in our family, so he doesn't have anyone in the rural area where he could see that. We never talked about it, how you are getting meat. And he was shocked during an interview when a psychologist asked him what we are getting when you kill the animal. But this is what I'm telling you. So sometimes there is no intention to discriminate someone, but with some stupid questions. And usually, if, for example, you are not updating sometimes, those tests. Why on earth when someone asks a kid who is 6 years old what we are getting if you kill an animal? And he was shocked. No, it was weird, but also the psychologist was also shocked that he doesn't know.
Well,
so that's
like you're calling your mother, so you can. And that is the fact. And I agree to so, and I have a neighbor who. So,
See, but this is what I'm saying. Like, we all live under different circumstances, but of course, the average amount of information that we have also shape our knowledge, realities, how we understand the society, whatever. But if we don't understand that someone is, for example, how many people with disabilities we have in Serbia? Do we know the number? I mean, like a percentage, not exact number, but percentage.
I think that there is something that I don't know where
you got it. It's 10%, around 10%. In all societies, there is 10%. When I speak about this is physical disability. So those that are using wheelchairs or other equipment. So 10%. Do we see them on the streets? No, because it's not accessible. So we don't understand, for example, because we had, I'm pretty sure that you never heard about Damjan Tatić. Damjan Tatić was our expert on disability, and he was a person with disability. Unfortunately, he passed away several years ago, but he was always coming to, for example, legal clinic to speak with students. And I know that I was upset when he told me, but you have to tell me exactly when the class starts and when the class ends, because I have to call for my transportation and to call it at least 3 days in advance to tell them when I need that transportation and when I'll be back. And I was just shocked. I never thought about it, how those people are using transportation. And then I remember once when it was such an interesting conversation with students, and they really had so many questions, but he really needs to stop. He really needs to run for his bus. So this is, for example, only one situation when you understand how it is to be in another's footing. So this is why I'm saying it's extremely important to understand that for legislators, for policymakers, for everyone who's shaping our life, most of them are not aware and they don't have an intention to discriminate.
For elections, we had like a question on our questionnaire: is the place friendly for people with disabilities? And everybody in the committee and said, "Don't worry, we don't have people with disabilities. We don't have them. They don't have it. If it does, we will figure something out." But that's why they were not seeing them, because they know it's not friendly for them, and that's why they're not friendly for them.
Yeah, of course, and it's a very good example, Una. And then we say, "Oh, but there is no need." Of course, that there is need, and this is a failure to provide to secure equality to everyone. Yelena, I know that you have to go, so please just go, and we will continue tomorrow. Or direct discrimination is that the direct discrimination cannot be justified. But indirect discrimination in some cases can be justified, but it can be justified. So this is, you will see that when we go through certain cases, and just remember that when the aid is legitimate and when the means used for that purpose are proportionate. So we cannot go beyond the scope and say, yeah, this is justification for indirect discrimination or for different the equal treatment of those who are in the same position. So it really depends on the justification, but it's also extremely important to understand that we have different grounds for discrimination, and gender is among those who are, how we call it, and the European Court basically introduced that term, is we need to have very weighty reason to justify discrimination. In other words, it's a suspect ground for discrimination. It requires very high standards, which is important to underline, and you will see. Okay, so here I put some examples of indirect discrimination, like where the employer does not allow flexible working hours and work from home. Why it is indirect discrimination? Who is mostly affected? Women, mothers with small children mostly, and it's very important because it's also jurisprudence coming from the European Union, because many EU countries had a problem not allowing flexible or maybe even working hours which are less than full working hours. And usually women, they required to work half time and not the full time in order to perform their maternal role. And this is what we already discussed as very important. And this is also another layer, so part-time employees. Then the employer requires minimal wage for the certain post. We already mentioned, for example, that it can also be the case. And I'm so sorry, I put weight, but it's height. I'm so sorry. I'm just seeing that something, is wrong with this example. And also the employer requires work at weekends or unsociable hours. What do I think about this example? Who can be affected? Exactly. Yes, exactly. So here, it's not clear whether it's gender related or who can be affected. And this is why it's important what Jelena said. You really need to know who is affected.
Usually, people who are expected to work the weekend or 8 hours, or the people who have kids, don't have family, and they're like, oh, like you don't have, someone waiting at home. You will go on a trip. You will go here. You will go there. You are always the one who is picked for those types of duties, and another one.
It's an excellent example.
Age. Yes, age as well. Combination without family is.
And thank you so much for also referring to that. now, and I think that you mentioned it for the previous course, intersection of different grounds of discrimination. It means that when we speak about women, and this is how we started today speaking about gender equality. So yeah, women as a category, but not all of them are in the same position. Among them, there are different groups with different subgroups. So being, for example, a Roma woman, older, living in a rural area, being with disability, oh my God, I mean, that Roma woman is not even in the same position as other Roma women, yeah? So, but it's an excellent example who is affected and what is happening in practice and how we also see some examples of discrimination as well. We also already mentioned this, but I just wanted to give you the term that we are using, associative discrimination. It means people who are affected by certain behavior because they're associated with someone. We had in Croatia, we had one example, also dealt by the European Court of Human Rights, that we had a couple, Roma men and a Croatian woman. So they were going outside, and then they were attacked by two males. They beaten both of them, but heavily the guy, the husband. And then all the time, they will say, you are to be blamed, why you are with him, why you are with him. So they repeated it several times. And then when they decided to go to, first of all, to the prosecution and to report the case to the police and then to prosecutor's office decided to proceed only with a case against him, because they said he's Roma, so there is no personal characteristic in your case, so you can do it by privately. But it's not a public issue, because for public case, we need to have different grounds recognized, and Roma is among them, but in your case, you're not Roma.
Where do we draw the line from discrimination to the hate crime? Because that was obvious, hate crime towards both of them.
Mm-hmm.
But where is...
Okay, hate crime is also a form of discrimination, like hate speech, for example. And hate speech is even expressly recognized in our law. So hate crime is a very specific institute because it can be criminally prosecuted. And it's very important because, for example, if it's not a hate crime, then you can use mostly civil suit to obtain your right, or maybe even to submit a complaint to the commissioner. It really depends on the country what are the mechanisms which are available. But hate crime is also all the elements that we discussed today. Superiority, you are attacking because person has certain personal characteristics, are also discrimination. Hate crime is just the consequences of the deed are more heinous, like with violence in general. Also, for example, when we speak about gender violence is also the cause of it is discrimination. It is also a form of discrimination. This is what many courts said. But at the same time, the consequences are so heinous that we have done different mechanisms. And it's important to recognize it as a special criminal act in the legislation as well. So this is why we are separating it and underlying the importance of it. And of course, it was a hate crime, but this is why they said, yeah, this is why when it's a hate crime, we have to go public, yeah, and to pursue with the case like by compulsory in the public interest. But in your case, yeah, you've been attacked. You can what you can do, you can submit your own private complaint, and then all courts said the same in her case. She decided to go to the European Court of Human Rights, and European Court of Human Rights said, oh, but prosecutor's office in Croatia was wrong. Why? Because this is associated discrimination. She will not be attacked that she was not with him. So that's the consequence of the act. Mm-hmm.
We also argue that also being with someone or being someone's wife or part of that is also a personal characteristic.
But what would be then personal characteristic? the person characteristic is not to be a wife. Yeah, it is an element which is taken into account to come to the conclusion that it was a form of associative discrimination, and we are protecting that person. As I said, like in a case when we have an employer who is discriminating a mother who has, for example, a child with disability, or if we have, it happened, for example, several years ago when we had a Pride. We announced the Pride, and then we had some people working for example, for Labris at a time, and that persons they didn't their sexual orientation was not being gay or lesbian, but because they defended the rights of gays and lesbians, they've been attacked in public because they, in a way, really thought that they are also gays or lesbians, or that they are associated with the group of these people. So it really depends on how it is shown.
Even I already talked about this in my elementary school where we had 10 boys who were gay or had those characteristics for usually people assuming that way. And it's in New Belgrade. My childhood was very
Wild.
Other girls who are with boys, we defended them. And the one who abused them said, "Oh, I don't care that you are a girl and that you are not gay, lesbian, whatever. You're protecting them. That's why you deserve this."
That's a very good example.
So, like, even if they know,
it's a very good example of associative discrimination. It's exactly, maybe you didn't know the term, but it's a good example of being a victim of associative discrimination, or maybe better, survivor of associative discrimination. But perceptive discrimination is another example that I, for example, gave for these people working for Labris if they were considered to be gay or lesbian. So it's not your case, but it's a case of others who are supporting those people, and then they are perceptive discrimination. This is why we call it perceptive discrimination. Harassment is also a specific form of discrimination, and it's extremely important. It derives from the European Union and from different directives which were adopted in the EU. As you can see, harassment is unwanted behavior. Here we have one photo of that behavior, which basically has a certain effect. Effect is, again, to humiliate someone. Yeah, to feel undignified after certain treatment, to have a hostile environment. So these are the consequences. And for harassment, we are concentrating on acts and the consequences of that act. So how you're feeling after that. Sometimes, and it's important for harassment that we have both objective and subjective elements. We have some cases, when someone is like making jokes, and those jokes are really not funny for example, for some women, especially if there are like male-female jokes. And then you have many women who say, but we are used to it, so we are not offended. It's not, even if there are objective elements to be to use the wording and a joke which is offensive, it is harassment. Mm-hmm. And this is why I have like zero tolerance towards certain acts. Sexual harassment is a specific form of harassment, and this is why it is particularly recognized. It is exactly what we are seeing here. So this is when we have unwanted also behavior, which is also physical, psychological, when we are offending someone, but in a way that we really want to humiliate very strongly, using sexual, let's say, elements of it. Do you have any example of sexual harassment? With jokes. Mm-hmm. Some other examples.
Some kind of nicknames that are unwanted.
Or kind of conditioning some, especially for, but also I know cases, etc., making any kind of sexual act as a condition for your benefits.
Absolutely. That's also a sexual harassment. Like calling her, like you're starting to work in a bank and then your male colleague, he got your number. He didn't ask for it. He got it and then he's texting you, calling you. It's even worse when it's like your superior. But there are a lot of examples and this is exactly sexual harassment. And then finally, the final. So it doesn't mean that this is the whole list of forms of discrimination because it also depends on the national legislation. I mentioned like hate speech. For example, in Serbia, hate speech is also recognized as a specific form of discrimination. But here I used what is accepted by international law. And as I said, usually these forms are deriving from EU legislation. Victimization, it is also recognized in Serbian legislation as well. What is meant by victimization? Victimization has happened in two situations. One is, for example, when someone is going through certain discriminatory act, and then that person reports to superior what's going on, and then that person goes through certain consequences of reporting the case. Second form is when, for example, Una and Dushanka are present, and then I'm offending, harassing one of you. And for example, Dushanka is a witness, and then she is reporting as a witness. So it's important. Then in this case, we are not. It's not important what is the Dushanka's personal characteristic. She is a witness, and she needs to be protected because everyone who wants to get protection, I mean, to report a case, needs to be protected. So this is why victimization is a specific form and very important because it allows protection in the environment, which can be very hostile towards those who are basically revealing what's happening within the company, within the institution, and usually it is related to the work relations. Although there is one film, but we don't have time now to watch it. You can do it at home, and then if you want at the beginning tomorrow, we can start discussing it. What I also wanted to, and we discussed a lot about it, that legally we cannot tackle discrimination if we do not understand what is causing, what are the causes of discrimination. And here we speak about attitudes. What is attitudes? These are tendencies to respond to everything that's happening in our life. So we can have different attitudes, which can be positive and they can be negative towards people, towards objects, towards season. So something we like, something we dislike. And these attitudes we are changing or we are getting, first of all, from our parents, then from our friends, from our school teachers, professors, those who have certain authority in our life, from media. So we are getting so many and shaping those attitudes and what we think, believe, that we know not from our personal experience, but mostly from the experience of others. Sometimes they are subconscious because this is how we were grown up. We are watching the dynamic between our parents, and this is how we see that this relationship between men and women should look like. Sometimes it gives us a support to change, to transform that reality because of what we've seen, we are annoyed by. Yelena so many times said that when she, what word she used for these terms that we discussed today for femininity and masculinity, that she's triggered by. Annoyed, triggered by, whatever. But it is important to know that having information about dogs, about different animals, about different people is something which gives us stability in our life because we also need to be protected in the environment. So this is why attitudes, they have different roles. What are the components of attitudes? And it's important to understand. One is cognitive. So this is what we see, what we observe. The second or affective component is we see something and we have a feeling for that. The third one is cognitive component, or how we act. So we think, we have emotions, and then we behave. And it's so normal. It's psychological thing. If we, for example, there is a first coffee shop in Belgrade where you can fed certain dogs, not dogs, sorry, but some animals, bunnies. I think bunnies, exactly. So, Una, exactly. I've never seen that. I've just read about it. And with bunnies, they said that the reason for that is that they are affecting good our let's say our body and then our emotions. That they have a psychological effect, very good psychological effect on us. So like when we see bunnies and how they behave, then when we can feed them and like pet them, what would be our emotion? To be calm, to be happy, and then how we will behave. Probably we will treat that bunnies in a good manner. What are the functions of attitudes? First of all, and why, to understand why it is so hard to tackle discrimination. First of all, utilitarian function. How do you understand utilitarian functions? That relates to rewards and punishments. How do you understand this aspect? Or in general, like relates rewards and punishments. It means that if you have attitudes which are shared by majority, then we will be rewarded. If we are minority and then want to stand and to explain to others that they are wrong, whatever, then we will be punished, because the group and people are always belonging. We have different identities. And for example, if I ask Dushanka for your identity, what would be the most important part of your identity? What you would say? You're a woman. Ksenia, for you? Young woman? No idea? Just pick one. So what do you think is the most important part of your identity?
Yeah. I wouldn't say something for me is to be a man. So it's something of value, certain values, I would say.
For example?
Political views.
Political views.
Yeah.
Okay, so your political opinion. Yeah? Okay, great. So we all have different identities. And for you, maybe males, but just because women are going through different, let's say, challenges. Maybe I would also say that for me, the most important part of my identity is to be a woman. Yeah. And not older woman, young woman as well. But we our identity is like an onion. We can peel it, and then after my identity of being a woman, I don't know, my next one maybe will be a Serbian, for example, and so go on, so forth. But it's very interesting to see, because also our identities are changeable category. Because, for example, that you are in a group of many more males, maybe you will also say, yeah, we are males. That's also a part of my life. Maybe not. It really depends on the circumstances. But in any case, when you feel threatened, then that part of your identity becomes more visible and more important for you, because you need to preserve it. Yeah. So the problem is why, for example, in some cases we've seen with judges, for example, judges and we had that in some reports when they see that some other judge is treating Roma client like negatively with some comments. Majority of other judges, they are not reacting. There is no reaction. Why? Because of this. Because they know that if they say something, then they will be attacked by other colleagues, like, and this is what, for example, I heard on so many trainings for judges, like, you don't understand what we are going through. You understand, like, to steal. They're always trying, to to find a way to play with the legislation and whatever. So yeah, you will be in a way rewarded or punished depending on the circumstances. So this is why majority of people, they decide not to act, and this is why it's very let's say hard to tackle it. Value expression functions as express consumers' values or self-concepts, so not consumers, but everyone's, yeah, not only in this area. So what is value expression? What do you think? What is the function of attitude, which is value expression?
Well, if I'm a man, and I think that I'm very cheerier, express that and think that every woman is subordinate.
So attitudes are also used to express our values. And for example, some a part of our identities also express our values, what we really value the most. And maybe what Matthew said was interesting for us because he's a political opinion. But this is something that is really important to him. And now that we ask him about his political opinion, then we will see the content of value. So what are the values that you share in the context of political opinion? Yeah? Ego defense function. What does it mean? It means that usually we are a group. So we believe that our group is better than others. So this is why we said the superiority. This is always that we need to tackle. Why? Because when we are members of the group, we feel safer. And we also see that others are intruders. They want to attack us. They have something that we don't have. And if their personal attitude becomes more valuable than ours, we are losing the power that we have, the power of a group. So this is why this ego defense function is also important. And knowledge function, I said that this is basically the most common use of attitude, is to give us a knowledge about the society. For example, if we travel abroad and we travel on a long distance flight, and we know that that flight will last for 10 hours, then what knowledge we have about traveling on such a long distance, that we need to have at least a pillow to support us, because otherwise, our whatever will, we will have some maybe pain, or we will feel uncomfortable, we couldn't sleep, things which are connected with that comfort.
Can I ask for you, can you use example not like other girls? So we are a part of the group, of women who are characterized as such, subordinate, whatever. But we are stating that we are not like other girls because we are not emotional, toxic, and we are considering ourselves more like men. Is that also?
It can also be in terms of what we say intersectionality. Again, yeah, it can also be because not everyone in one group are unified. I mean, they don't have the unique views. So it really depends on with whom we are comparing the group. But then we see that ego defense function. Yes, we can also have with, for example, feminists. We have a lot of women who are absolutely against feminism because they treat feminism as a negative thing, and they also believe that it will destroy the family, the primary role that women have. Yeah, absolutely. But it's also interesting just to understand, and these are the core functions of attitude, just to understand why it is so deeply rooted in our being, and why it is sometimes extremely important to tackle those issues very hard, but at the same time, this is a prerequisite to deal with discrimination, because we've all of us been discriminated, but at the same time, we also discriminated someone consciously, subconsciously. Okay, so Dushanka, can you give me one example that you've been discriminated and that you maybe discriminated someone?
When was I discriminated? Yes, I have a good example. I was competing on a high school recital competition. I was fourth grade pupil, yeah. And I was and beside me there are two boys who were also competing, and one of them was in the second grade, and the second one I think first. It doesn't matter. And I'm really good at it. Really, I'm not being on. I forgot the word. It doesn't matter.
It's
But,
too late. I know. I'm also struggling.
Jury that was consisted of three women who were teachers. They told me openly, "You're a woman and they are boys, and they will compete better because they are less. There are like many more women, many more female people who are competing in recycling, and they will have more leverage there." And that's why I was not chosen. I mean, with the that happened in the first 4 weeks, and that was like. And the second one, when I discriminate somebody, when I'm choosing if I'm on international travel and I have a person who is speaking my language and the others who are not speaking my language, I tend to go to the person who is speaking my language because it's easy. And that is not, it is discrimination because I am connecting more with the person who is.
It's easier for you, yeah.
I'm,
Excluding
that.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, it's an interesting example. Mm-hmm.
Well, I will speak about one specific case because usually as a girl in Portugal, discrimination also. But once I experienced the racial discrimination against me because people assumed I was in Sweden with a friend of mine in summertime, so we came after a long period of the sun and very tense, usually in summer, and I have a
They're like Latin American.
certain part of the Swedish town, which is very like Delhi in Belgrade. And we entered into a bus, and everyone looked at us like this. They were like, "So we haven't experienced it ever in our lives." And I remember the person who was driving the bus like, "Do you have a ticket to let me show me?" We were the only ones who were asked to do all of this, and they didn't believe us. Where did you pay? We were completely shocked. We didn't know how to react because we never experienced this. So it was very weird, and that's how, because here in Belgrade, in my experience so far, we don't have as much as facial problems, issues as much, but that was very weird. And we left the bus, and then we understood it was all white, very crappy people, and they looked at us. We are disappeared. So it was very weird.
Another example?
Another example, I was working when I was younger. I was working at a taxi shop with children, and I was like, we were playing something. I was carrying, looking for the kids while the parents are and we playing something. And a group of Roma family entered in the store, and the kids, there were two little kids who wanted to play with us, but they started to pull me or something. And I was like, "Please, stay away for now, blah, blah, blah." I in a subtle way, I tried to separate the kids, and those were the nicest kids ever. To kids, and when I realized how I behaved, I remember I went to the manager and I said, "Oh my God, I was very bad." And I was like, "Why? No, they're like grown children. Who cares?" And then I understood it, and I went to that. That's it.
But it's a good example. Thank you for sharing this story with us.
Yeah, well, I had a similar experience with solitaire with dark in especially in the summer, and especially you mentioned Czech Republic, we have family there. So I was there, I speak Czech, my mom speaks Czech, and I felt a little bit also like a part of the community until then. When my friend visited in Czech from my grandparents, and she is born, and most people at first they interacted with her, we go out, and thought they were Ukrainian or Russian, because she didn't speak the language. And for me, because I spoke the language, that I am Roma.
Wow.
But also, yes, that's when came to my mind because of Dania, but also I had a short hair all my childhood, and I was always a boy. And
It's very painful, yeah.
like, characters, like playing the family, so it could be a brother or something. But I disappointed my boyfriend. I didn't want to go out with him because he was from a small city. And I thought it would be an narrow-minded, small-minded, and I also come from a small city, so maybe someone can think as well for me that. But yeah, then mountain and wrong. But yeah, first I hesitated to go out because I'm not city on the south of Serbia.
It's very, very interesting, and thank you also for sharing that story. It's good that now you're together and he is fine with your first impression.
I think I never.
Never?
No, so my cisgender male from socioeconomic background. I think I never experienced discrimination, and I think where I discriminate is definitely discrimination of class. It's not an active thing, but it's something that is, I think, deep in our society. When I look at my friends, it's all like one socio-economical bubble, more or less. And it's not like active discrimination that it's something you would think about, but it's something that subconsciously happens.
That's a very interesting example. Try to think about this is homework for you until tomorrow evening when we have family judgments class. For some, if you can still remember, it's good that you have that perspective that you've never been discriminated, but I'm pretty sure that in some point you've been through some disadvantage, or maybe you were not aware, which is also very good. It's a good fact, but just try to think about it.
Shouldn't like, of course, I have been at disadvantage because of my gender, but for example, that's lacking the structural thing, the structural part. Because
can you explain in what way it was discrimination, that you've been discriminated because of your gender?
Well, I wouldn't call it discrimination, but say, of course, there. Well, because I'm a male, I would say there are many assumptions to make based just on my gender of myself, which I think when people get to know me or every male, it's not that. Of course, I know the reason for these assumptions and the mechanism to protect themselves as well. And I would say, but that is kind of treatment what I get as a male, but I wouldn't call discrimination because I wouldn't say that.
Okay, but not necessarily that it has a structural component, that it is discrimination. But I understand what you want to say. A good point. But it's also in a way disadvantage, or at least presumption, which can lead to discrimination. It really depends on how the act or failure, what are the consequences of act or failure. If it was only a friendship, for example, then it's like more or less something that is part of emotions, but not exactly, the discrimination. At the same time, if you went to that disadvantage because it was in school, if you didn't got, or you been hurt, as Dushanka explained to her example, then it can even be discrimination. It really depends, but it's good. I mean, that you made a point on class, because class is extremely important, and it's also recognized as a ground for discrimination. Absolutely. And we have also women living, in certain countries, which but even Roma women are also a part of class, but not only them, many other examples that we have currently. Okay, so here I have this photo. We have a lot on attitudes, but I think that it's important also to speak about this. So what I already mentioned how we are forming those attitudes, and we already, I think, mentioned many of this. Maybe just religion or culture, but you also with class you mentioned culture. It's a part of formation of attitudes. And then to understand what causes discrimination are these three components of attitude. Stereotype is exactly that first component, the notion that we have about something, very stereotypical things that we are giving, basically assigning the same characteristics to persons belonging to a certain group, although we are not giving them individual assessment of whether they have it or not. For example, what we usually think about Germans in Serbia.
Punctual.
Punctual. Are you punctual? It means that. Yeah.
But I see the stereotype.
But exactly, this is what I'm saying. So it's a stereotype, but we really believe that we're very punctual. And I remember when we had a group of students from Germany, PhD students, and they came for 3 days in Belgrade, and then we really made a plan, for them to have from early morning classes until the evening, because we thought that this is what, German students will expect. And after the first day, they were like, okay, but we also came to Belgrade for vacation, like also to have some fun, we've heard that there is a lot of fun. And it was also presumption, what are the expectations? Yeah, so this is, for example, a positive stereotypes. So it's really important to understand that stereotypes can be positive and they can also be negative. What is the stereotype about Serbs? What you've heard before you came to Belgrade?
I have to say, in Germany there isn't much distinction between former Yugoslavia.
Mm-hmm.
So there aren't really stereotypes about Serbs. Mostly probably related to war.
To war. So what would be like the most stereotype about Serbs? They're aggressive? No, I mean, you can say all openly because we are discussing, this is a part of our class and exercise.
One of the stereotypes in Germany is that Serbs are pretty nationalistic.
Nationalistic.
Don't work on their history. For example, like we did in Germany.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that, for example, presumption that we have about Germans is exactly the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and this is why it is important, to break those stereotypes. And as I said, they have been positive and they can be negative. Mm-hmm.
For example, there is a stereotype for the people who have Down syndrome that they're always happy. And that can be a positive, but also they cannot be less happy or sad or have any other emotion that is not happy, because and that is then positive, but also negative stereotype because you are eradicating them for the.
That's a very good example. Excellent. So basically, stereotypes are what we know. So how we are collecting these attitudes from films, from videos, from media. Yeah. Prejudices are emotions. So what we think, whether it's positive or negative, then we'll have certain emotions. We'll be happy. We will decide to come to Serbia to explore. Yeah. Or we will be frightened because we know that there is someone who is aggressive. Yeah. So these are the emotions which are prejudices, and then it leads to discrimination. How we will behave, how we will treat someone based on these generalizations that are affected to someone. So it's really important to understand this dynamic. And why? Because there is a lot of psychology in what we want to legally basically regulate and to combat. And I'll stop here because tomorrow we will speak about CEDAW specifically. We will also continue with some additional cases, and with some cases from tomorrow is the time for judgments. So discuss it. But do you have any question to what we did today, and maybe you want to add something? And also, I'm really sorry for those of you who are online. I'll stop sharing this presentation. If anyone wants also to say something, please go ahead. Everything was clear? Online, no questions? Okay. If not, I wish you a nice evening and see you tomorrow at the same time. Okay?
Laco noite, professor.
Goodbye. Ciao.
Radimel.
Bye-bye. Take care.